LRT Subcommittee meeting of May 23rd, 2024. Reminder that all electronic devices to be switched to a non-audible function during committee meetings. As we have quorum present today, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have with us Councillor Huang, Councillor Maureen Wilson, Councillor Crutch, Councillor Kassar, citizen member of the subcommittee, Carl Andrus, and Michelle Diplock, and Anthony Salimi. Thank you all for being with us. We have our front bench here to support the LRT agenda items, as well as our clerks. So ready to kick things off? Quorum is present. On we go. First motion is approval of the agenda. Could I please have a mover and seconder?
Chair Nan, I have a changes to the agenda first.
Oh, well then. Do you want to tell me about those changes?
Sure, the following changes were made to the agenda. Item number 6, delegation request. James Kemp, respecting keeping the city accessible during the construction process. He's going to be presenting virtually for today's meeting. And item number 8, staff presentations. 8.1, applying a climate justice lens to the light rail transit report PED 24087 citywide.
Thank you for that. So it's moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, it's before committee for vote.
No, it's coming.
That carries on to declarations of interest. I need to declare at this time, either disqualifying or non-disqualifying. Seeing none, we'll move on to minutes of our previous meeting. May I please have a mover and seconder? Mover, Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Electronic vote if there's no discussion. And to fellow subcommittee members, you can join us around the horseshoe. I'd prefer if it's one or the other versus both. So come on onto the horseshoe. And that carries on to communication items. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive communication 5.1, which is correspondence from Rose Jansen, respecting our transit system should remain public. Mover, thank you, Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Any discussion on the communication item? Seeing none, it's before subcommittee to vote. And that carries. Almost. It carries. There we go. Delegation. 6.1 is James Kemp, respecting keeping the city accessible during the construction process. It's a virtual delegation. May I please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation request for today's meeting? Moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Kassar. I need committee members to vote. And that carries. So first up is James Kemp, respecting keeping the city accessible during the construction process of the LRT. James, you're joining us virtually. I see your square. If you can turn on, there we go, we can see you and we can hear you. So you know the rules of delegation well, Mr. Kemp. You've got 5 minutes. At the 4-minute mark, you'll hear a little ding, which is a reminder that you have a minute remaining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pardon me. Good morning, Madam Chairperson and members of the LRT Subcommittee. Thank you for taking the time to hear from me today. My name is James Kemp, and I'm here today to speak regarding an accessibility plan for the LRT project. Well, we're on the verge of the largest transformation of this city in its history, a decade-long project sweeping through the heart of Lower City, Hamilton. While its ultimate goal will be to better connect the city, it must first cleave it in two, and herein lies the rub. Regardless of whether you think this project is good for the city or not, or whether it should be operated publicly or privately, the time for such discussions is over. We're in the roller coaster. The bar is down. We're heading up the hill. We can hear the chain going clickety-clack beneath us. We now have to figure out what to do when we reach the top and this roller coaster really gets rocking. On a side note, you gotta love that I worked in a train metaphor here. Construction projects are very disruptive. They tend to disrupt the lives of all those in proximity. Accessibility around construction sites is never a serious consideration. The people in charge see it as a temporary problem, and everyone affected can just figure out how to deal with it until the project is complete. If accessibility and safe passage of those with disabilities is ever considered, it is an afterthought and with only the most minor of accommodations. This project, however, is going to take years and will spread across the entire lower city. Accessibility through the construction areas must be maintained for the safety and well-being of all. A good friend and mentor had an experience I would like to share with you. I can't ask him to share it himself as he passed away last March. His name was Tom Manzik. Tom was visually impaired. He carried a white cane, but he didn't use it until he really needed it. One day, he was traveling through downtown and somehow ended up wandering through a construction site. He quickly realized he was somewhere he shouldn't be, but was completely disoriented and couldn't find his way out. He wasn't even aware yet that he was on a construction site and was in serious danger. Finally, he was spotted by some workmen and led out to safety, but they remarked how he was lucky he didn't fall into the pit. The thought of how close he came stuck with him, and I could still hear the fear in the voice a few times he related the story to me. I relay this story to highlight that people with disabilities often have different interactions or experiences with the world around us, and others have difficulty empathizing as we don't have a common frame of reference. My last name is Kemp. My family has a long history of construction in this city. I myself have experience with industrial, commercial, and residential construction, both as a sub and a general contractor, from concrete footings to high structural steel, as a laborer and as a foreman. I tell you all this so you understand that I know what I speak when I say that little thought is often given to the environment impacted by construction. As I mentioned, it's supposed to be a temporary situation, and everyone is expected to find a way to cope until it's completed. However, the LRT project is so big and will take so long that we need to have an actual accessibility plan in place. I know that staff will say there are rules for making a site accessible, but they are insufficient in our experience, and guidelines would improve the matter. There also needs to be a direct line of communication to the project to relay concerns and find solutions to address them. I understand that once the groundwork is laid, Metrolinx will come in and we will lose all control of the site as they operate more like a black box, but it is my hope that if we show them the way and they see the benefits, they may choose to follow. I know that sounds optimistic and maybe a little naive, but I know of no other way to do this job. Now let's get down to brass tacks and discuss what we're talking about. For every path diverted, an alternate path within 100 meters should be provided. It should be a relatively smooth and firm path that connects us back up to sidewalk level. As people using canes, crutches, walkers, and rollators struggle with every step, we must keep the detour to a manageable distance, as it is unfair to those that cannot bypass the work altogether. If it has to go beyond that distance, I would go so far as to suggest a seating area be attached to provide a rest point. While small bumps, rough terrain, and obstructions are easy for some to manage, it is difficult and painful for others. Fencing should not encroach upon the sidewalks unless absolutely necessary, and loose rubble in the path of travel should be attended to promptly. Attention must be paid to proper wayfinding for the blind and visually impaired. There needs to be high color contrast markings clearly delineating the path of travel, and as we are redirecting urban braille, perhaps those white cane bars we had inside on the sidewalk bypasses are some version of them. Furthermore, attention needs to be paid to those with hearing loss. There needs to be warning indicators, not only in sound, but also in flashing lights to attract attention and alert people to danger. Regarding signage, any complex information should also contain pictograms to improve comprehension, and all signs should be mounted up on poles and not placed on sidewalks, creating obstruction. I have a number of other suggestions, but I only have 5 minutes of this meeting. I know of a committee that contains several working groups that would love to work with staff to make this transformational project go more smoothly and improve accessibility, not just for people with disabilities or seniors, but for all citizens of the city of Hamilton. A rising tide raises all boats. In conclusion, this project will affect the lives of those living in the lower city dramatically. Accessibility is usually added as an afterthought during the planning of these projects, and I'm here today during the early stages of the LRT to ask that you make more effort to address it before a shovel breaks ground. Other LRT projects are plagued with accessibility issues, so let's do what we can to make ours different. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your delegation. Speakers list is open, and first up is Councillor Crutch.
Thanks very much for your delegation. Briefly say, before I ask a question, I attended some of the early LRT discussions that were held as public meetings on the subject, and this came up a number of times. And the discussions were about what other municipalities have done when they were going through LRT construction, what was successful and what wasn't. I'm just curious to know if you've had a chance at any point to weigh in on those things or look at those kinds of things, see what other cities have done when it comes to LRT construction, where things were successful and not. And then when we go to receive this, I have a question for staff.
In answer to your question through the chair, I don't have experience with the plans in place. My experience is more with the complaints process. So I usually do the research from the other end, just oftentimes because different municipalities are a little difficult to manage. They're almost alien compared to ours. But I do know it from the complaint point of view.
Okay, thanks. And you've been pretty vocal on this subject for a while now, so I think I know where you stand, but appreciate your delegation. Thanks for coming forward.
Thank you. Next up, we have Member Andrus.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for your delegation. It echoes a lot of what we're hearing at the engagement events that we do at the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, and we outlined construction concerns in one of our reports to the city around that, so I hope to hear more from staff around that. My question to you through the chair is, what do you believe that this committee can do to help get ahead of, so that we are not being reactive in dealing with the construction complaints that will come and dealing with issues that occur as they're occurring? Is there a proactive solution that either you've found in your research from other municipalities or recommendations that you have for this committee that can get us ahead of that construction concern and those construction mobility concerns? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I find that I apologize. I just had a bit of a brain. Could I have a quick recap on the question? I'm sorry.
No problem. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to repeat. So just very quickly, if you have any suggestions for this committee that we can be proactive as opposed to reactive in dealing with the construction concerns that you've outlined and the ones that we're hearing from residents around, of course, 14 kilometers from property line to property line of our city being torn up for anywhere from 3 to 6 years.
I apologize for that. Thank you very much. The idea of being proactive is trying to foresee what is technically the unforeseeable, but because we're using lived experience, we're getting a much better view of what the experience of our from others. So my best recommendation is that we try our best to foresee all possibilities. That way, when we do come across those we haven't met yet, we're not already dealing with other issues. With those issues already taken care of ahead of time.
Thank you very much, and I have a question for staff later as well.
Thank you. No further questions for our delegate. Seeing none, thank you again, Mr. Kemp, for your delegation. And we now need to receive the delegation. So if I could get a mover and seconder. Mover and Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Crutch. Electronic vote to receive, and then we'll open up to questions related to staff. Your computer's frozen. Would you like a manual vote? No? Okay, we'll just bear with the tech catch. That carries. Thank you. Okay, questions?
This has been something I've been concerned about for, I guess, nearly a decade. And when we had speakers come and talk about these at public meetings, they didn't have excellent answers to the questions that were asked by crowds about what exactly the plan was going to be. I've seen this play out in other municipalities in Ontario. I've even seen it play out when it comes to large reconstructions of downtown, like for instance in London, Ontario, who recently reconstructed a big portion of its downtown. When I went there 2 different times, once during the construction, then once after the construction, I saw the implementation and it was, at best, terrifying. So what is our plan? What can we do to ensure that there will be a plan and a public forum for feedback on the subject, so it's really clear exactly how we intend to deal with accessibility concerns during LRT construction? Because at this point, I don't have that access to some of that stuff, and it may already exist, but my question is, what's the plan, and is there a plan to bring that forward and get feedback and so forth?
Over to you, Director.
Morning through Chair. My name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office. Thank you, Council, for the question. From my previous experience working on similar kind of project, normally they do develop some kind of a working group during construction where they bring the industry experts and the stakeholder. If there are any construction-related issues like accessibility and other, they normally discuss in those forums and then try to mitigate and address. So they do bring that working group during construction where they bring these issues and then try to address those during. And in terms of accessibility, I can mention that, Metrolinx have standards. Typically, AODA is the minimum standard, but they do have some higher standards, which they have been applying to Eglinton Crosstown and Hazel McKinnon line. And in my opinion, they will be continuing to use the lessons learned from those projects and will apply it to this Hamilton LRT project.
Councillor?
Thanks. So I understand what you said is that it's a reactive plan that takes place during construction, not something that's necessarily proactive and developed in advance of construction. I just want to say in Ward 2 specifically, there will 100% be impacts for residents to accessibly access services in the core during construction. Metrolinx has 100% told me that already. I've walked through block by block with them. It's an extremely narrow corridor in Ward 2, and the most of the pedestrian realm will be significantly impacted at some point. And so I'm happy to bring forward a motion and work with you offline to come up with something so we can get a recommendation to Metrolinx to make sure there's a plan in place in advance where we specifically know we will be doing something, because AODA standards are not good enough. They're not actually designed for things like this, actually. We don't have standards in the province that are meant for this kind of large-scale development at the pedestrian level. So I don't need to get into the big debate about it now or questions now. I can simply just work with you offline to come up with something in advance of the next LRT subcommittee meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. And Member Andrus, you indicated you had a question as well?
Yeah, so along a similar vein around the proactive versus reactive, and I'm just wondering, when the councillor was through the chair speaking of those kind of proactive steps, I just wanted to say the centering of, as our delegate pointed out, the people with lived experience of disability is really important. And on other Metrolinx sites that I've toured, it tends to be that reactive, and it tends to be unfortunately very difficult where you have to reach out to the Metrolinx customer service representative who then reaches out through their project chain, through the contractor to the subcontractor. So having a process that centers people with lived experiences to be able to not only pre-design some of those accessibility challenges, I think would be essential, as well as making sure that the process is ironclad and people are very aware of how they can get those mobility challenges addressed. So I'd just like to ask through the chair, what considerations have you heard from Metrolinx besides the construction table that you're talking about around centering the voices of people with lived experiences with mobility challenges, especially during this project? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. It will be a continuous dialogue with Metrolinx, and I can just mention there is already a lot of discussions happening with Metrolinx and our stakeholder accessibility as well. For example, last year, accessibility committee members, they toured the Waterloo Ion project and then provided some lessons learned for Metrolinx, which we conveyed to Metrolinx, right? So what we heard. And similarly, I think there is a meeting scheduled where our staff will be presenting to accessibility committee probably in April or May, where we will hear their concerns, and these are the information we will bring to Metrolinx, right? So obviously, Metrolinx has a number of lessons learned from other projects as well, but we will continuously to advocate our accessibility requirement to Metrolinx during the construction. And I want to mention about the process, because there will be a permitting process involved, and where city staff will be looking at our traffic control plan during construction, and our staff will ensure that whatever the concerns we raise from the accessibility committee, or whatever the city standard requirements are, they are being applied by Metrolinx contractor when they're developing the construction management plan, right? So eventually they will require our permit, and we will ensure that these interests are protected when they are starting the construction.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to be clear that we did have some flexibility during the permitting process for influencing this. Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you. So that exhausts our speakers list, and we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is staff presentations. And our presentation today is applying a climate justice lens to the LRT PED Report 24087, and Director of the Office of Climate Change Initiatives, Linda Lukasik, will provide an overview. Thank you. Oh, Director, you first? Yeah, go ahead.
Through the chair, I just would like to start, and I will let Linda, the report in front of you today titled Applying a Climate Justice Lens to Light Rail Transit is prepared by our Office of Climate Change Initiative, Dr. Lukasik. So I would like to thank Dr. Lukasik and her team member, Beatrice Okoko, for developing this report. This report is in response to the notice of motion that staff received at the December 11th LRT subcommittee. The notice of motion resulted from the presentation delivered by City Lab semester and residents, students at the December 11th LRT subcommittee. The notice of motion is also included as a motion in today's agenda. The staff believe that the report has addressed the notice of motion, and the members of the council may consider to withdrawing this motion. And I would like Director Lukasik and Beatrice, they will be doing a joint presentation. I will let Dr. Lukasik to lead this item. Thank you.
Through the chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Linda Lukasik. I'm the director of the Office of Climate Change Initiatives, as you already heard, and I'm here today with project manager Beatrice Okoko to provide this presentation to you. And as you already heard, the office was asked by Director Sheikh to prepare this report in response to Gani Hamilton's LRT on the Right Track, a report on findings and recommendations for Hamilton's light rail transit project from a climate justice lens, with the idea of reporting back to all of you on the subcommittee respecting which recommendations the city is acting on and if there are additional recommendations for the light rail subcommittee to consider. So in addition, I just want to share with you that our office felt it made sense to use this report really as an opportunity to begin to share with all of you the work that we're doing in the Office of Climate Change Initiatives to develop a climate justice framework for the City of Hamilton. And that framework is really intended to guide municipal efforts to implement climate mitigation and adaptation actions that are set out in Hamilton's Climate Action Strategy. Beatrice is going to share more about this piece as she is leading this effort as part of our team. But I'll note here that climate justice really depends not just on final outcomes, but on an inclusive process that engages impacted communities in determining pathways forward. This is really important. And I also just want to emphasize, too, that our effort to develop a climate justice framework is in its very early stages. And I think it's fair to say that most municipalities across the country are just starting to figure out what steps need to be taken to effectively integrate climate justice into the work that they do at the municipal level to guide climate action in a meaningful way. And again, more on that emerging framework in a moment. So I just want to speak quickly at the outset to those recommendations, and you'll see in the report that we did take a look at each one of them and provided some information just to give a sense of efforts that are already underway within the municipality on some of those pieces. Just want to highlight a few of them, and then we'll get into talking about that climate justice framework and its applicability to LRT work. One of the requests was in there around inclusionary zoning, and we just want to, of course, I think you'll all be aware that the city's planning division is currently exploring the feasibility of inclusionary zoning as an affordable housing tool. But we would point out, if you're considering this from a climate justice point of view, there's a challenge with inclusionary zoning in terms of providing deeply affordable housing. We know that, that tool tends to provide slightly lower, more affordable housing, and really no ability for the municipality to require private sector housing to be built in a climate resilient manner. There was also a reference made to passive house design, so we've acknowledged that there is some wonderful work happening already on that front. And I think fair to say we'll be seeing other equivalent forms of building construction that pay attention to climate resilience moving forward. And it's worth noting as well that the city is in the process of developing green building standards that we're hoping will have a positive impact moving forward on private sector developers where climate resilience is concerned. We also commented on the land value capture and donating land, acknowledging that, council has taken steps requesting that Metrolinx allocate surplus LRT lands to affordable housing in the future. Also want to acknowledge the transit-oriented affordable housing lab that's underway through Social Innovation Canada with the city and many other member organizations at that table, looking at how we can get mobility justice happening and the importance of seeing people having the opportunity to have safe, healthy, affordable, and climate-resilient housing within access of the LRT. The report also recommended a seat at the table for Cycle Hamilton, and acknowledging that need to hear that voice of active transportation. And we certainly agree with that, but you'll see from the report as well that as we walk through this notion of a climate justice framework, it really does demand more than that, more than just that addition, and it demands some reflection on what other voices need to be at the table to address climate justice effectively. There also is a recommendation to subsidize LRT fare prices for low-income individuals. This for us, again, is a climate justice, mobility justice issue. And in the report, we have acknowledged that the city will have control of fares and will receive proceeds from the LRT fare box, so certainly is in a position to make existing programs like the Fare Assist program work seamlessly across the LRT system as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Beatrice now. She's going to talk a little bit more about the climate justice framework. And what we did in the report was we tried to illustrate for you what a preliminary application of that climate justice framework to those climate adaptation and resilience recommendations from the City Lab report might look like. So over to you, Beatrice.
So good morning. Hopefully I'm going to get this right. All right. Let's press it again. Hang on a second. Point to the computer. There's only a few, so thank you very much. So really, the first step is we're asking ourselves, many of you have heard us talk about climate justice and the fact that we're working on a climate justice framework. I'm just going to pull up my notes here. Excuse me 1 second. Really, the first point is, what is climate justice? I apologize, I've lost track of my notes here. Okay, so as the City of Hamilton transitions to a healthy, vibrant, prosperous, zero carbon future, and we're responding to those calls, we hear a lot from councillors and from the community that there's a need to understand to move forward considering climate justice. So climate justice addresses not only the environmental aspects of the climate crisis, but it also addresses the social and economic dimensions, striving for an equitable and inclusive approach in the face of this challenge. Look at the next slide. So it's a framework. I really apologize, I'm kind of lost in my notes here. Yeah, the plan really is for a co-design of climate justice framework. So right now we're in the beginning stages of what that will look like. So we're working on a project charter, and the pieces are coming together for this framework. But one of the key pieces that we're working on is that it be built on 3 equity dimensions. So we've got recognitional equity, and that would ask who should be included as a stakeholder in climate action decisions, and whose needs should be prioritized based on identification of groups or communities who are most vulnerable. So we heard right now through James Kemp's presentation right there that there are considerations that are not included right now in a project such as LRT, where the accessibility needs of many people with disabilities are not being considered. So the reason we really need to recognize that there are voices that we haven't really heard that are not at the table. Procedural equity also considers how to make municipal decisions are made and who is involved in these processes. And this type of equity ensures that the plans and actions within a municipality accurately reflect the needs and wants of the community. And then the third dimension is distributive equity, and that considers distribution of climate action, benefits and burdens. Who's been harmed, who will benefit, and we're trying to make sure that any project that comes, such as the LRT, a massive project like the LRT, where are those, who's going to benefit from those, and who's going to, prioritizing those, we're calling them frontline communities, who are most impacted. So we've got Indigenous communities, we have persons with disabilities, we have Black community members, there are many, seniors, there are people that are in this community, and those benefits, because of the fact that the climate crisis is least those groups of people are least responsible for causing climate crisis, and therefore their needs and their aspirations should really be the main focus of any municipal climate-related project. So I'm just going to skip ahead here. I don't know where I am this time. I literally haven't been looking at the slides at all. Oh, great. Thank you so much for that. You've moved ahead. And this is sourced from Lazarus Munich, and it's actually through the David Suzuki Foundation. We're kind of basing our framework on these three dimensions of climate justice. So recognitional equity, procedural equity, and distributive equity. So can you please advance to the next slide? Thank you so much. And yeah, so through this applying the climate justice framework to the LRT, we had the opportunity to look at the report through the students, the City Lab semester resident students wrote in partnership with the Hamilton Community Benefit Network. And we were able then to really examine and be really specific about where are those three dimensions of equity, climate equity, where they're highlighted, and Linda just went over where those pieces were and what needs to be added. So we're looking at, especially when applying these equity dimensions, we have to really recognize, again, the needs and opportunities. So we're looking at the historically marginalized groups and what are those opportunities to uplift, and how are those climate action benefits going to be distributed, again. So in terms of the LRT, are we going to, we're thinking about something like displacement, or thinking about housing that Linda just covered. We have seen that housing is extremely important, affordable housing. How can we ensure that this actually happens? These are some of the questions that again, we need more voices around the table to kind of examine and make really meaningful recommendations. So, because I think that without those voices of frontline groups, and I know there's been great engagement, but the project has been delayed, and there's been a period of time where engagement hasn't happened. So we're hearing there needs to be those voices added to the group. So I'm just going to carry on here. I don't know what's next on my slide deck, but if you don't mind, thank you. So yes, here are the recommendations. I just touched on the fact that, first of all, we really do recommend that the city continue to apply climate justice lens, even though the climate justice framework is still being developed. But this is really an opportunity for our office as well to use this opportunity to as a showcase, as a case study, almost as a guinea pig kind of testing ground to make sure this is right. So, so that's the first piece, like to actually continue the application of the climate justice framework, a lens to this project. And then the second recommendation that the LRT subcommittee recruit additional non-voting community advisors to the LRT subcommittee. So this could range from, and of course LRT will be responsible, this subcommittee will be responsible for adding new members to this, but really to reflect the community from a climate justice point of view. So whether it be members from the Black community, members from the Indigenous community, to have a voice at that table. And from there, recommendations can be a lot more tailored to the needs and unique challenges of these groups, as we have heard from the first delegate, that those needs are not, there's no plan. So there's no concrete plan, and so therefore having those voices can really help form and create a plan. So I think that's it for me today. So thank you. And
Thank you so much for that overview and the presentation. Subcommittee members, the speakers list is open, so if you could indicate, I see Michelle Diplock, Carl Andrus, any others? Okay, so go ahead, Member Diplock.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm wondering if the concept of an intergenerational equity can also be added to the framework. So I think one of the challenges is Hamilton is seeing across our entire city a broad-based housing shortage of all types of housing that is impacting our community, with thousands of children moving out of the community into Brantford, Niagara, and further beyond. So the costs of the climate crisis need to be kind of broadly shared broadly across the tax base to respond. Otherwise, I think it could significantly exacerbate our social inequities between existing homeowners and young people and newcomers that are moving to the community. So I think if it's possible to include that in the framework, I guess that's a question about whether or not it can be. And
do you want to answer that, Linda? As far as
I can start, but then Beatrice, you may want to add. Certainly, I think, as we're developing this framework, the whole point is to acknowledge, who are the groups who are being more impacted, and what kinds of considerations do we need to be integrating into the framework in the manner that it's applied. And I think we're realizing too, once we have a framework in place, it is going to be very context specific. So I think part of the process will be, Beatrice used the term co-design, and so the effort there will be to engage people who are impacted in various ways to help with designing the approach that would be used in a given situation. But Beatrice, I'll let you add.
No, for sure. I think that's the next stage for the climate justice framework development will be to host engagement meetings. So through trusted allies that will be hopefully included, at least for us, those workshops. We're reaching out already. We've reached out to a number of local groups, and they are community service providers and well-trusted allies, really. That's why this is the best word I can use in the community. So they can also do that engagement on behalf of the city. So even with the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, I know they have done a lot of engagement around, and they continue to do that engagement, but again, having more of those often groups of people may not feel safe to share their feelings or what their concerns are, their issues are. So if they are engaged with people that they know and trust, we're going to get a lot more of an exchange that's going to be authentic and actually be a meaningful, exchange. Yes, hopefully that answers your question. But I love the idea of that intergenerational aspect, which is something that definitely I haven't thought about. And well, again, with those new voices, and we'll hear a lot more about how this should be shaped moving forward.
amazing, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next, we have Member Andrus.
Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your recommendation around additional members to the LRT subcommittee meeting. There are certainly a lot of voices that could be heard around this table from the community. So I really appreciate that. My question through the chair to you is, one of the sections in the student report talked about implementing climate adaptable public transit infrastructure. In your report back on it, I didn't see a mention of that. So my question might not be to you, it might be to Director Sheikh, is what steps is the City of Hamilton taking to look at additions to the project that might be over and above the scope that Metrolinx provides in terms of stations for us to perhaps choose, if this committee wishes, to create a more climate resilient or more climate adaptive? And you mentioned some of the small suggestions in your report around weather protection, additional wayfinding, bike connections, drinking fountains, and washrooms, some of which are not standard at all in Metrolinx delivery. So my question to staff is, once the conversations with Metrolinx are concluded, is there a wish list that for climate adaptation or through the climate justice lens that staff may be compiling to bring back to this committee for additional consideration over and above Metrolinx built form? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. As you know, like Metrolinx is leading the project, and especially the system infrastructure, which include stops and LRT infrastructure that will belong to Metrolinx all the time in ownership. But in my opinion, that once climate justice framework is, like developed, finalized, and I think that's a way where we can influence or where we can recommend to Metrolinx certain requirement what we would like to see in the project, right? So according to the MOU, Metrolinx is required to oblige all of our standards, and once this one becomes a standard, then we will communicate to Metrolinx and we will try to make sure that our standards are being applied. But again, Metrolinx will remain the owner of LRT system infrastructure, and they will be the ultimate, the final authority in terms of what elements can go. But we can definitely recommend what comes from the framework.
Just a quick follow-up question through the chair. Just as a point of clarification, obviously it's a Metrolinx-based project, and Metrolinx is paying for 100% of the capital and lifecycle maintenance costs of the project. I guess my question was specifically, sometimes I've read in Metrolinx projects where cities have added additional infrastructure to projects over and above what Metrolinx is paying for. So my question is, more specifically, is there a wish list that's being gathered based on stuff that Metrolinx might not necessarily pay for, but could be adaptations we made to the system while construction is undergoing, when those adaptations would be their least expensive because the infrastructure is already being taken up? I know we're doing some upgrading to water mains, for example, through our own capital projects. So I guess I was wondering where once Metrolinx says, I'm sorry, but our standards for stations are not what your climate adaptation standards are. Is there a list being compiled of staff of wants or wishes or upgrades that could be considered to the project? Thank you.
Through the chair, as you know, Andres, that the system infrastructure will come later, and procurement too, which Metro is little too early. Right now we are focusing more on city infrastructure. And yes, there is established process which we are currently working with Metrolinx, that if we have to add certain infrastructure, not just underground, also surface infrastructure, and there is a process which we are currently working with Metrolinx, that how we can add those betterments on top of Metrolinx basic requirement, which is being currently developed with Metrolinx. And then that process, in my opinion, will also be applied to the package 2. And we will continue to come to the LRT subcommittee members if there is additional beyond what Metrolinx requirements are. If we have to add, then we have to bring that business case, and if city is able to fund that one, then there is a mechanism to add these infrastructure into Metrolinx procurement. But again, it will be subject to Metrolinx decision whether they would like to add into the scope or not, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the presentation? Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the presentation and the thoughtfulness put into it. If I could just try and tie the two questions together to make sure I understand what is about to unfold and its application. So Member Diplock asked about an intergenerational framework, which I'm very appreciative of her doing. The challenge, of course, is at present, we've already lost a number of younger people who wouldn't be able to participate perhaps in some of those discussions because they're already gone. And some of them may be still at an age where they're coming up. So just kind of bookmarking that as a principle as opposed to perhaps a practice, because they don't perhaps normally engage in some of the community groups that you may or may not be referring to. And then Member Andrus' point of how we can imprint or affect perhaps the built form. I'm leading to a question here is just so I understand the expectation that's forthcoming from your work. Is it the expectation that the climate equity lens will influence existing corporate policy that is guiding the work, say, of Director Shake, such as the Complete Streets guideline, that climate equity would sort of inform and overlay that? And or will it be a separate corporate policy in and of itself that could give some effect to what Member Andrus is speaking of and Member Diplock? I'm just trying to understand the road ahead. Thank you.
Okay, through the chair, maybe perhaps you can help me out with this after. But first of all, the idea really is that this be a guide that staff can use when they are doing their projects that they can refer to and hopefully become actually a policy that they can actually go, okay, every project, every climate-related project will be using this climate justice framework as a point of like a starting point. So wherever from start, ideally, I know many municipalities are just only beginning to include climate justice in their climate plans. So it's been a bit of a challenge to find communities, municipalities that are actually doing that from the get-go. But you know, I've found some in the U.S. that are definitely San Diego. There are definitely municipalities and cities that are just using this as this is what we do. It's going to be standard. When you start your project, you're going to have an equity screening tool, matrix indicators. You're going to have a tracking method. You're going to have a way to show how this project will benefit community members and specific community members too. So getting more detailed, more specific. So I think, you know, an engagement process, engagement plans, all this, I know it sounds like a lot. And for us, it's also, you know, as we're learning more and more, but we have to start somewhere. And it's almost like climate action plans missed the boat by not including climate justice right from the get-go, and they're kind of catching up. So so we're not the only municipality that this is. We're definitely not. It's an emerging kind of trend, I think, now that we're looking at climate justice from the beginning of any project. So I hope that helps a bit. I'm going to pass it to Director Lukasik, and maybe you can explain a bit more.
Thanks, Beatrice. Only to say this is really, this is a framework to guide process. So Councillor Wilson, you acknowledged, you know, the Complete Streets policy guidelines that we have in place as a for instance. And so the idea that we're pursuing here is to create this framework so that as we work as a municipality to implement climate action on the ground, we're paying attention to that climate justice framework, that process, so that we're ensuring that we're engaging, you know, the right community members in the conversations that need to happen. You know, so one example, you know, as we were working through this report, we were excited about, and I know it's on today's agenda, some of the additional sidewalk width, for lack of a better description, that's been secured for the project. You know, there's a wonderful example of if you layer a climate justice framework on top of that project element, then you're wanting to make sure that you've got those voices at the table, whether it's someone who's got accessibility challenges, whether it's a senior, whether it's someone in that neighborhood who, you know, needs to travel on foot from home to an LRT stop. It's that idea of engaging people in a process that we hope will be more effective in bringing all of the voices to the table that need to be heard. So again, those 3 pillars of equity are what come into play to help to make that happen.
Thank you, through the chair. I really appreciate that. I don't wish to prolong the discussion, but I would like to go back to what Member Andrus was suggesting, and I'll just footnote my concern here. In any and all things, what cities are fundamentally going to have to do is change. And it is, I think, both for good governance and transparency, and what is always necessarily a tension in that change, is that in having a framework and a policy, it enables elected representatives anyway to make the case for that change, to justify that change, to look at that budget allocation as an investment, because it necessarily upholds these public principles that make life better for more people. And that's kind of where I'm going, is something in which to ensure that we have those available when it comes to these opportunities, to these challenges, and to support us in our decision-making. So I'll leave that. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. Any further questions? Second time, Member Andrus.
Just one last quick question, and that was around the engagement piece, not specifically around the climate, but as it relates to the Hamilton Light Rail project. As was mentioned in the presentation, both the city and Metrolinx have not done any fulsome community engagement on this project since prior to its cancellation. And through the chair, director indicated that during phase 2, there might be some opportunities for talking about when we get to the built form. So I'm just wondering through yourself, either director, what there might be in terms of an engagement strategy around the climate justice lens to the light rail transit as the developments become more public and the planning becomes more public, and we get a better sense of the design and built form. In the original environmental assessment, we had full charrettes of the designs of the streetscapes. Obviously, there's significant changes that are underway. So I just wanted to get a sense on when we might be looking at some re-engagement being done, especially if we're talking about a climate justice lens for this project. Thank you.
Through chair, I will probably take on, and then I will let Director Lukaszek. So yeah, so I think it will be a combination, in my opinion. First of all, we have our own governance structure while delivering the LRT project. So we have internal governance where we have the core working team, where we have a steering committee, and Dr. Lukaszek is part of our steering committee. And then we report to the LRT subcommittee like this one. So once the framework is established, right? So, and then we have that report from City Lab as well. So these are the things which we will continue to bring this information to the core working team, to Metrolinx, and then we have to report this to LRT steering committee, what we have, and if there are any issues which we can proactively address, then we can bring those information to the LRT subcommittee for the direction, right? So in my opinion, this would be a direction. It will be mostly will be going through the governance framework what we have on our, and it will be more better if we have that framework finalized, so that we have the policy or framework where we can let Metrolinx know that, you know, these are the established guideline principle we have through the framework, which we would like to adopt to LRT project. And then we will continuously monitor that one through that governance framework we have already established.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Lukaszek.
Thank you, through the chair. Just want to add a little bit more to that as well, just from our perspective. So we'll certainly, you know, it's the Office of Climate Change Initiatives to continue to work with our colleagues in the LRT office to talk about how we can, Beatrice and I have been talking about piloting, innovating here, trying to figure out and using the LRT project as a bit of a testing ground for the framework. So certainly we'll continue to talk about the opportunities to do that. And I think it's worth mentioning here now is Beatrice is ramping up to start to do more engagement. And we just talked the other day about the idea of, maybe working through HCBN and other member organizations in the community to engage, some of the networks that you've built in the co-design process for the climate justice framework itself. So there are lots of possibilities, and I know Beatrice has already detailed and shared with us a lot of her vision for how all of this will unfold. So I think we'd be really excited to come back and continue to share as that work unfolds, as it applies to LRT, but also more broadly.
And actually, I just wanted to share through the chair that as well, we have a new climate change advisory committee, and I have heard from one of the co-chairs that one of the working groups will be on climate justice. So I think that's going to be also helpful for our case. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, good. If Councillor Crutchy could take the chair for a second, I have one follow-up question on the recommendation. So recommendation B through you is to recruit additional non-voting advisors. And then I was going to ask about whether or not the Climate Change Advisory Committee was looking at ways to intersect on this issue. So could you speak a little bit more about the working group and how you see that work potentially informing this one? And then my secondary question procedurally as chair is what would it look like in terms of timeline to enact recommendation B, should it be approved by subcommittee today? So first over to you and then over to clerks.
Okay, so through the chair, we have only had one meeting of the Climate Change Advisory Committee, but there seems to be very much energy around that climate justice working group. So as I said, I just got my first email from the co-chair, Ian Brozak, and he was expressing that he's going to be sending more information to the members for those who want to be participating in that. We will likely, I believe, they will have to develop a plan and figure out what they actually want to, what are the opportunities. So it's very, I'm sorry, it's very vague right now, but I'm sure we're going to have better answers for you at the next presentation.
Appreciate
Thanks.
that. Thank you. Through you, Chair, the second question was a procedural one. So timeline for recruitment, should committee approve recommendation B?
Through the chair, I can start.
Okay.
And actually clerks may want to weigh in too on this. We did take a look at your terms of reference, and it does appear that, as committee members, you're empowered to add more non-voting advisors, but maybe I should be deferring to clerks in terms of their interpretation of the terms. So.
Yeah, the terms of reference state that you can have any non-voting advisors around the table that you'd like, so that would be up to the committee.
Thank you for that. Okay,
Yeah, just to clarify, it might help. The selection committee process would have to be invoked to do so. Like, what happens with that? Maybe that's the other part of your question, is how that actually operates. Like, how do we get non-voting members here?
The non-voting members were appointed by the committee. They did not go through the selection committee process.
I introduced that wrinkle for our discussion. Councillor Dan, if you have anything else to say about that?
Yeah, the puzzled look on my face. Okay, so then through you, the makeup of this LRT subcommittee, non-voting members, was through a selection process by this committee and not through the city's formal selection committee process?
I'd have to research that, but I believe so.
Okay, so then the final question on this, if recommendation B is approved by subcommittee and then ratified through the standing committee and then council, I guess somewhere along that line of finalizing and ratifying the decision, if we could get some clarity around the process, that would be beneficial before it gets to a standing committee.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, taking back the chair, no further questions on the presentation. Thank you both so much. And you're relieved back to seats. Okay. Okay, if I could please get a mover and seconder to receive the presentation first. Moved by Councillor Crutch, seconded by Councillor Kassar. We've already had a thorough discussion on the presentation, so it's before committee for a vote. And that carries on to the report then. May I have a mover and seconder for the report? Councillor Maureen Wilson, seconded by Councillor Huang. You have a question on the report? Yep, this is the right time. So anybody has questions on the details of the report, please indicate so we can add you to the speakers list. First up is Councillor Maureen Wilson.
Thank you. Through the chair, on the report, which were my question, was around the recommendation. B, and I'll read it aloud in case anybody's following publicly and doesn't have it in front of them, that the LRT subcommittee recruit additional non-voting community advisors to the LRT subcommittee table to ensure that the subcommittee's composition reflects the community from a climate justice point of view. Appreciate the report and the recommendation. That is a lot in B, because it does raise questions that have been, some of which have been flagged here, including my understanding is that this subcommittee's membership was declared prior to 2018, so many moons ago in terms of how that was done. And that begs the question of who. I know I thought the report referenced the cycling committee as one possibility. We now have a climate advisory committee. So if I could, through the chair to Director Lukasik, Director Sheikh, and/or the clerk, would we require a different report on the possibility of how that could be constituted or how that would be done, maybe further to the issues that were flagged during the presentation? I was holding my question on that.
I am unsure.
Directors, have anything to add?
Through the chair, if this is a direction, we can probably bring another report providing what specific membership we would like to add to the LRT subcommittee, and it will be up to LRT subcommittee to approve.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And just appreciating, I think what was implied also from the presentation is that the LRT subcommittee, if its membership was to change, it's not intended to be an exhaustive thing. The questions were asked about subsequent consultation. I believe Beatrice talked about they'll be thinking and talking about outreach along the way. So I do think, just for transparency and structure, that this committee needs to give some thought to how to, once it's passed, assuming, how to activate that. So I think we need further, if the recommendation passes, we need to have a further discussion on how to activate that and some intentionality around it through the chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I think perhaps we might want to consider a slight amendment to recommendation B, given that there is some process clarity that's needed. And the directors have mentioned that they could bring back information. Clerk has mentioned that they could bring back information. So maybe we make a slight amendment to B to say that staff report back on a process to enable the LRT subcommittee to recruit additional non-voting, et cetera. Would that satisfy the discussion right now around committee? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. I thought I heard Dr. Lukasik said they looked into the terms of reference and there is a capacity. It's not my issue. It's, if I take Dr. Lukasik, she's done the work. She says it is within the will. It is within the the capacity of this thing, it's the how. So it's not can, it's how. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, reporting back on a process to enable, right, it's the how. So I guess the conversation is still available to the subcommittee. Do we want to refer that process, do we want to inform some of that process building now? Or would we like to delegate that to staff to bring back a report on with recommendations? Member Andrus and then Member Crutch, or Councillor Crutch.
Regardless of the direction through the chair that the voting members of this committee take, I think it is important, and what we did here today is that the City of Hamilton already has a bunch of advisory committees that fill these roles. So maybe through the chair, finding a way to empower them to be more part of some of the processes that happen at this LRT subcommittee may be something that the voting members and staff want to consider. We've heard from, like I said, there's a climate change subcommittee. We have all kinds of these subcommittees that are, I should say, advisory committees that have been established through the City of Hamilton. So perhaps maybe empowering them to be more part of the LRT subcommittee in some way may be something that's worth considering. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crutch?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the suggested amendment you're trying to get happening here, which is just to enable the process for us to do this. So there could be all kinds of folks. It could be the climate change advisory committee that could be, have one of the co-chairs or both appointed to sit here. It could be Environment Hamilton. Like, we could go on, right? But we don't have a process right now that people feel confident about in the room today that we know will work to do that. So great. I think your amendment achieves that staff will come back and they'll report on how we're going to do that, what makes sense to do. That's, I think, what you're saying. I'm happy to move that if that will get this motion to happen.
Thank you for that. And then Councillor Huang is indicating seconding the amendment. So clerk, are you clear on the language? Sure, thank you. Thank you, much more accessible. That staff report back on enabling the process to recruit, sorry, that staff report back on the process to enable? Recruitment of additional. Okay. Mover and seconder, good with that? Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, it is before committee to vote then on the amendment. Huang. And that carries. And now on the report recommendations as amended. Mover and Councillor Huang, seconder and Councillor Kassar. Thank you. Perfect. You already have your mover and seconder. Any further discussion on the recommendations and the report? Seeing none, time to vote. Thank you, that carries. Okay, on to our consent items. First up is 9.1, Hamilton LRT Partial Property Acquisition Update, PED Report 24083. May I please have a mover and seconder to put the consent item on the floor? Moved by Councillor Danko, seconded by Councillor Huang. And over to you, Director, for an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, my name is Abdul Sheikh, Director, Hamilton LRT Project Office. The report in front of you today titled Hamilton Light Rail Transit Partial Property Acquisition Update Report, which is PED 24083, provides an update on property requirements from third parties to facilitate the LRT project. And I would like to thank Anna Cruz-Roof for providing this report. Anna is our Senior Project Manager, Heritage and Urban Design, dedicated full-time on LRT project. So just to give you a brief history, as per MOU executed back in 2021 with Metrolinx and MTO, Metrolinx is leading the property acquisition process, and their obligation is based on the project-specific output specification, what we call PSAS, that was developed back in 2019 before the cancellation of the project. As per the PSAS, the project is required to provide a minimum of 3-meter pedestrian zone where possible on both sides of the LRT corridor, which includes a 2.5-meter urban braille sidewalk and a 0.5-meter furnishing zone. Since the execution of the MOU, the city has completed the complete street design guideline manual, which recommends a 4.75-meter pedestrian zone for high pedestrian volumes. For your information, the pedestrian zone is an area between the roadway curb and the city's right-of-way property line. So Metrolinx is currently dealing with 163 third-party properties for partial acquisition, which initially included a 3-meter pedestrian zone. The city assessed each property and identified around 122 properties as high-ranked, which should accommodate a wider pedestrian zone per our complete street design guideline manuals. Metrolinx's initial response was that city is responsible for incremental costs from 3-meter to 4.75 meter. However, after several weeks of negotiation, Metrolinx agreed to bear the incremental cost as a project cost. So in conclusion, we are pleased to share this positive news with the members of the council and the public. It shows the dedication of city staff and Metrolinx staff in resolving competing interests in the best interests of the project. We are committed to maintaining the collaborative spirit as we move forward with the delivery of this important LRT project. So if you have any question, we would be happy to provide responses. Thank you.
Excellent update, Director, and thank you for your collaborative negotiations with Metrolinx. On our speakers list, we have Member Andres, and followed by Councillor Crutch.
Thank you very much through the chair. I'm really excited about this. I can't tell you enough through all of our engagement that HCBN has been doing since 2016 on this project. This is one of the things that we heard from residents was serious concerns around the pedestrian and the built form experience and the potential for greening of the corridor. So I'm on behalf of members of the HCBN and everyone who's ever given us feedback on this subject, I really want to thank you for the hard work and negotiation with Metrolinx in securing this space. I have a small question, and of course this is one just to percolate because we are talking about phase 2, is when we get to the port where we're starting to design some of these built forms, again, I would bring back that question of engagement of when we can go back to the public and having them take some time to help co-design these spaces once the appropriate time that we talk about furniture, we talk about trees, there's all kinds of small opportunities for engagement with the public on a ward-by-ward basis that I'm excited about, but obviously we're quite a ways away from that, but I just wanted to put that on the radar, and thank you very much for the hard work on this. And just, I guess, by way of question through the chair is, can you just elaborate a little bit on the potential for community engagement once the appropriate time is to talk about these building spaces and perhaps having our residents have some voice in shaping those new spaces? Thank you.
Through the chair, Councillor Andres, thank you for the question. As you what we understand, Metrolinx still have to bring what we call reference concept design, proof of concept, and they are probably planning to bring that updated design by end of this year. But again, design will be subject to the development phase when they have the designer and contractor on board. But Metrolinx is planning to bring the updated design in end of this year, where LRT subcommittee and public will have opportunity to provide comment on those parts.
By way of a follow-up question, do we have any procurement timeline then? In terms, I don't want to get you on fixed dates or anything, because I know that clearly that's not possible, but is there some spitballs you can have on that kind of procurement timeline and where we are on that?
Through the chair, member Andrews, we don't have that information. Metrolinx have that, Metrolinx has not provided that information at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Fretch.
Yes, I also want to thank staff for doing this because the street trees issue specifically has been a really big concern raised by the community. A lot of what had been planned to be done before was to remove those street trees, then locate them nearby. And when we're dealing with street canopy issues and wanting to have a canopy on King Street, having those street trees on the actual street itself is important, so I appreciate that. I think it's important to understand better, and perhaps this is a conversation for later, but I'm really wanting to get a better sense of where these properties are, where the impacts will be specifically. And that might be something that has to happen in a closed session, I understand that, but I really want to get a sense of where the impacts are going to be here, because right now I have a vague sense of the mass, or 122 of 163. I can do a math percentage there, but I don't understand in terms of other kinds of related context about the impact of this. So that would be really helpful information to have at some point in the future, and I've already followed up with an email, so we can do that later, but I want to say thank you as well.
And yeah, so Councillor, through Madam Chair, so we can work together, Councillor Cratch. We were thinking that, once Metrolinx update the RCD, then we will have a better sense, where we are able to meet 3 meter, 4.75 meter, and then we can bring those discussion, and we can, there will be a design development phase once Metrolinx go through the procurement process. So there will still be opportunities to discuss Wyden Boulevard and all those things. But I would suggest that if we can wait until the Metrolinx bring forward that updated design, and we can provide more information on that part.
Yeah, and we can follow up by email about that. Do you know when they're planning to bring forward their updated design, like in terms of number of months from now, like approximately? I don't know those timelines off by heart, unfortunately.
They are aiming to bring the update design by end of this year. They haven't really provided the timeline, but we will discuss with Metrolink if there is an opportunity to bring additional information in advance. And because there are some confidentiality nature in terms of property acquisition, maybe we can bring certain information in a closed session, but we will be discussing with Metrolink and we'll let LRT subcommittee members know.
Thank you.
Thanks, those are my questions.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, the consent item has been moved and seconded and before committee to vote. And that carries. On to 9.2, Hamilton LRT Early Works Update, PED Report 24084. And may I please have a mover and seconder to put the report on the floor. Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. And back over to you, Director, for overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our second report, as you've seen, is Hamilton Light Rail Transit Early Works Update, report number PD 24084, which provides an update on LRT-related early works undertaken by the city, which are mainly funded by Metrolinx. And I would like to thank Chris McCafferty, who is here, for providing this report. Chris is a manager design LRT who is dedicated full-time on LRT project and is responsible to lead these early projects. And we thought it's important to provide that information. While we are waiting for the procurement to begin for major construction, it is also important for our members of public to know that there are several other activities that our staff is engaged in with LRT project. And these activities, I would like to give some highlight that they are not just limited to, some of the key activities what we are working on, refinement of the design, as we mentioned earlier, streamlining cities' standard processes, developing agreements with Metrolinx, confirming operation and maintenance responsibility, community engagement, which our full-time staff is working with Metrolinx, and most importantly, delivering early works project before major construction begins. So as mentioned in the report, there are currently 5 early works projects that are in various stages from design to tender to construction. And it is also important to note that some of these early works are being coordinated with city's capital projects to facilitate cost-effective delivery for the city and Metrolinx and minimize the disruption to the community. So the first early works project mentioned in the report is Sherman Avenue South, which is currently under construction. The second project, Wentworth Street North, is included with Capital Works project, which is planned to go out for tender soon. The third project, Nash Road and Queens Road, is also included with the Capital Works project, and construction of this project is just begun. The fourth project, Main Rosewood, is currently in design with construction anticipated in fall 2024. And the fifth project, Main Street and Ottawa Street, is planned for construction in spring next year. There's more information available in the report, and if you have any question, we would be happy to provide responses. Thank you.
Thank you. First up on the speakers, we have Councillor Huang.
Thank you. First off, I'd like to really send my thanks to Chris McCafferty, because I want to speak specifically to Main Street, East Rosewood, essentially project number 4. It is currently in the design stage, and so they were very great with being proactive, with sitting down in my office and asking us about the design and what does that look like. So for those that may envision, the Queenston traffic circle in my ward will then branch off to Queenston Road, but then there's also Main Street. Main Street runs parallel to Queenston Road, and so this project will be to essentially redesign and make it a lot more pedestrian friendly and specific to a complete streets framework. One of the questions that my office has raised was about a bike lane and enabling alternative transportation, because there were different parts of the bike lanes in different parts that may connect to Main Street, but it felt like it was a disconnect when it came to an actual cycling infrastructure. So my office is asking for the opportunity to include a bike lane along Main Street. It is considerably a lot of work. I am now making Chris a lot more gray because of this, but I don't have a notice of motion today for committee, but I did want to let committee know that we're working on it. And we may bring something forward at another standing committee, just because we didn't have enough time to potentially put something that was a little more fulsome and thought out moving forward. But I do want to thank Director Shake and his team, but definitely Chris McCafferty. He's also come out to a bunch of our Ward 4 town hall meetings to talk about this enablement, so the community knows that it's happening. We're also just ensuring that as we're building and designing something for the community in the future, we want it to be fulsome and holistic. So just wanted to let committee know nothing's coming at this meeting, but we will likely see something come forward at another standing committee.
Appreciate the heads up, Councillor. Over to you, Councillor Crutch, and through you, also similarly wanted to say thank you to the team and the 2 projects that are, well, the 1 project that's already underway on Sherman Avenue in Ward 3. The amount of pre-conversation we had with the community to inform residents about the changes that were coming in the design, the opportunity of doing that deep subsurface work enabled addressing some community safety concerns that have existed for a long time. It's a location, in particularly that conflict intersection between Main Street and Sherman, is this active school route where children walk through in order to get to elementary school. And the portion of Sherman that's being done now is also an active school route. So the construction work is being managed really, really well. I've gotten a lot of good feedback that the early signage has been really helpful. The wayfinding for parents and kids has been really well accommodated by the construction team and folks in the community. Just wanted to share the appreciation that the Ward 3 office has been receiving on the works to date. So great work, excellent work, and more of that to come with the projects that are been outlined in the report. So taking the chair back, any other questions on this consent item? Seeing none, then it has been moved and seconded, although our mover just left the room. So I'm happy to, or Councillor Crutch is also indicated. Sure. That carries. On to our next agenda item, which is motions. First up is 12.1, small business supports during LRT major construction. And the second one is applying a climate justice lens to the LRT recommendations. Councillor Huang's out of the room, so, oh, she's back. No, all good, all good. I'm going slow. No apology necessary. When you're ready, Councillor Huang, could you please introduce your motion and your seconder? Thank you.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. Should I read all of the whereases in? Okay. This motion speaks a lot about supporting small businesses during LRT major construction. And I think that we have heard time and time again from multiple municipalities about them going through these major constructions, that small businesses suffer. So this motion seeks to be proactive and ensure that we are trying to find the best types of incentives, mechanisms, funding in order to help facilitate small businesses. Especially on this particular subcommittee, we have great representation from our business improvement areas as well as our chambers of commerce. Brenda is sitting right beside me from the Stoney Creek Chamber. That this is a real opportunity for us to be a lot more of a leader when it comes to taking best practices from other municipalities, but also trying to be innovative when it comes to finding funding partners and ensuring that we are building the best possible business environment for our municipality. So therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to research and explore potential small business grant and support programs available to the City of Hamilton, small businesses, or business improvement areas during the light rail transit major construction to support impacted businesses along and adjacent to the LRT. That staff be directed to complete this scan once every year until the substantial completion of the Hamilton LRT project, and that the results of this scan can be presented to the Light Rail Transit Subcommittee. And C, that staff be directed to collaborate with Metrolinx, FedDev Ontario, and other funding agencies to enable the implementation and marketing of these small business supports ahead of the LRT major construction. I am also thankful to Director Shake and his team, as well as Economic Development. I do note that Judy Lamb is on the screen too. It is something that we need to be very mindful of as we are moving forward with all of these. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The speakers list is open. First up is Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support this today because it is research and exploring potential and a scan of other jurisdictions and municipalities, and noting that the LRT project is fairly more substantial than a standard construction project. So I think it is important to look at how we can support businesses along the corridor, absolutely. However, I'll note a little bit of concern with the idea of grants. So every single time there is a construction project, businesses that are impacted by a road closure or that construction project come forward with the exact same claims. This is routine. It happens in every municipality, every jurisdiction, every single time there's a construction project. And it always comes down to the issue of bonusing individual businesses. And if you approve a concession to this business, how do you not approve it to that business? How do you prove lost income? How do you show that the project is responsible? And it's also municipalities and government agencies have the right to do work within their right-of-way. It's part of, just that's how it works. So I'm fully supportive of looking at how we can support businesses through signage, access, promotion, everything that we can do. But again, I'm hesitant of the idea of direct grants. And I'm also a little bit hesitant, and I think we would need some legal interpretation about what is a small business and if it's possible to limit access to grants to small business, because I don't see how we could do that. Every business, whether it's a small business or multinational corporation that is impacted, I think would have a similar claim if we put in a program like this. So happy to support it today, just noting my hesitation on a few of the aspects that are being put forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maureen Wilson, then Member Andrus.
Thank you. Happy to second it, and thank you to Councillor Wang for working with staff and taking this initiative. Certainly, it is something that we've been hearing for some time, that concern. I am cognizant of Councillor Danko's simmering worry and appreciate that he's marked it for us. I think one of the challenges stems from, and I can only speak to some construction in a commercial area that took place in Ward 1, is while it is disruptive, no doubt, the owners of the land in and around that area are going to be reaping the benefit from the enriched assessment. And they did not at all assist in some of those small businesses that they rent to that during the disruption. So they're reaping the benefit of public investment. But many, as I understand it, did not engage with perhaps some of their commercial entities to assist during that time, whether it be lowering of rent, whether it be any kind of assistance. So my question is through the chair to staff, and I see Member Dunnett with his hand up as well, so maybe he has further information. Involved in your scope of study, will you be looking at any possibility of land value capture to help perhaps assist in these things?
Through the chair, I would request if Judy has more input, but I think we have to research whatever the other municipality have done. But Judy, if you have any input on that part?
Yes, thank you to the chair. Judy Lam, Manager of Commercial Districts and Small Business and Economic Development. That's an interesting question. I don't think I've ever heard of that sort of procedure in terms of looking at the value of the increase, but it would be an interesting, I think, part of the research that we would do. I think in terms of the grants that I've seen that was provided by Metrolinx and through FedEv Ontario, that the grants went to the BIA or a community organization to help promote the area that it was still open, and whether it actually provided direct grants to the businesses themselves. There was rehabilitation grants, of which we also offer, for example, facade grants that we would look at integrating to make sure that all businesses can access those. But in terms of looking at the value of the land, that would be an interesting research that we would do.
Thank you. There is a report that is Canadian specific that mentions Canadian jurisdictions. It is an exploratory report, so I'd be happy to share it with Staff Member Lamb and any of my other colleagues who may be interested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Member Andrus, followed by Member Dunnett, then Councillor Crouch.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to speak briefly to this motion. I appreciate that the Community Benefits Network has heard a lot about support for small businesses in our report that hopefully staff will have a quick glance at when they're reviewing this motion. There was a lot of suggestions that came from our input through the community around business support. So I guess my question and concern to through the chair on this motion is the idea of support for businesses outside of BIAs or catchment areas that are not included in the chambers. There's a lot of racially owned businesses that exist outside of BIAs and perhaps do not have chamber membership and may have memberships in other organizations like the Afro-Caribbean Center or something. So I just wanted to make sure that this motion was broad enough to include and consider those areas, and also to include the concept. This seems to be rather specific to direct subsidies, but doesn't perhaps include the ideas that was mentioned by through the chair, Councillor Danko, in terms of public space animations, festivals, those kinds of things that the city can do more broadly to support areas of businesses as opposed to just direct businesses or direct landowners in this specific case. So I just wanted to mention that to the mover and see if there was any consideration of those two concerns around businesses that may not be included in catchment areas or maybe represented by other organizations, and of course maybe looking beyond just specific grants or subsidies that we can give business, but other ways that we can provide business support through wayfinding, through festivals, through the chamber itself. I'm sure would have a lot more to say on this itself. And then of course, just when staff looks at this, to ask them to just give a quick glance to the community feedback that we got on business support. Thank you very much.
So some response, Councillor Huang?
Happy to take those as a friendly amendment.
Okay, so would that friendly be in item A?
Yes.
Sorry, I just want to make sure that if it's a friendly, then it gets integrated.
So we could add it as a D to include in the report back businesses that are outside of a BIA catchment or not associated with a chamber along an LRT route, and look at other ways like street festivals, wayfinding, in order to promote businesses within that area along the LRT corridor.
Promote/support. Yeah.
Sorry, Carrie, thank you.
Okay. Okay, on the friendly amendment, Councillor Crouch?
Yeah, I just want to make this easier. Hopefully, it already says what we need to say. Maybe we just clarified it. So it's just, the word "or" is already there. I think we're doing too much work here. It says, the staff be directed to research and explore potential small business grants, blah, 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 blah. Small businesses or business improvement areas during the light rail transit major construction. So like it includes every single small business. I'm grateful for Member Andrews for clarifying that it does, but I don't think we need a separate addition with the fact that "or" is right there to save time.
All right, save the work. All right, so A, striking D and recognizing that A has some language that includes support programs, not just grants, and has the word "or" as a way of enabling more inclusivity. There we go. Okay. So we're all good. We're moving forward. Sorry. Over to you, Member Dennett.
Good morning, everyone, and quick sound check.
Can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. I was just obviously we are very supportive of this, and I think just as context for everyone in the room here, much before my tenure and before the pandemic in 2017, the Hamilton Chamber of Commerce launched an LRT Ready program, which was a 4-part business readiness series, and that's something that we've been re-engaging and moving forward with our friends at Metrolinx, and we did that in partnership with the International BIA as well as the downtown BIA. So we've got a partnership proposal to work through some of these aspects and did think through the processes of BIA businesses, King West businesses, larger employers on the LRT route, as well as the social services within the corridor and the impacts that they may have as part of those groups that we look to engage with. So would be glad to work with and support staff in terms of ensuring that we're not duplicating work, but enhancing and managing messaging, and obviously are supportive of finding ways to ensure that the businesses along the corridor are able to be successful and then truly thrive once the LRT is fully up and operational. So that's our objective here. And so support putting programs and systems in place that ensure that happens.
Thank you. Just want to reemphasize that this is the benefit of having non-voting members around the table in being able to help inform some of the report back pieces. So the document that was referenced from the Hamilton Community Benefits Network, and also the work that the Chamber is doing as inputs to the staff report in this motion. Next up on the speakers list, we have Councillor Cretch, followed by Member Wilson, and then Member Braithwaite.
A little bit more motion fiddling if we can, that's why I'm on the list. B, there's an orphan remaining in B, if we could put it on the screen. And the orphan is the word scan, appears twice, but nowhere else in this entire document. So I think it might have referred to another B that used to exist before, but there's no scan. The word, I don't understand what that word scan means here. So if there's any way to clarify that just even very slightly so it's clear what that means, because it says the staff be directed to complete this scan once every year. But the word scan is nowhere else here. So what scan is that? If that helps. Might just be a drafting thing. I just thought it would be helpful to have that clarity for staff.
Environmental scan? Would that be a little more clarity?
Scan of what?
Of the types of grants, programs that are available during major construction. So I will add, perhaps Carrie, we can ask.
If you throw that in B, that would be great.
Complete a jurisdictional scan of grants, best practices to support small businesses. Period. And this scan happens once a year. And this.
So may I recommend that it read that staff be directed to complete a jurisdictional scan of grants, best practices, grants and best practices to support small businesses once a year or every year. Get rid of "and this scan will happen." Yep. Does that satisfy?
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
And friendly amendment. Okay, on to Member Wilson.
Through the chair, thank you. I was also going to say very much what Greg was saying, that as a chamber representing small businesses, and even if they're not members, our job is to make our community grow and be productive. So yes, we need to get in front of some of those. We need to have some meetings with all of the businesses along the corridor and kind of work with them. One other thing I did want to bring to this subcommittee is I'm on the Marcom committee, and we spend a lot of time, and they're a great committee, working on how to make Hamilton a place to come to, live in, work, bring your business to, but perhaps there's a way to tie in some of this grant money to some marketing of this whole thing. We're making the city better, we're growing, we're amazing, that kind of thing. So maybe some of that grant could be tied in with a marketing strategy.
Thank you. And then final is Member Braithwaite.
Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to thank Councillor Huang for putting this on the agenda. This has been an ongoing conversation that I've been a part of since the beginning of time, it feels like. I just wanted to back up what Greg said. I think the LRT Ready was a great program that the TBIs and the Chamber put together. I'd like to see that reinstated, but that does take an investment in funds for that. And just to note, we did have conversation with Metrolinx about sort of the standard of what they give BIAs. And one thing that we would need support from the city is to speak about the topic of things have changed since the pandemic, inflation, that cost has definitely gone up and the number would definitely need to increase. So the BIAs, I think, are happy to take on the marketing part of trying to drive people through the businesses, but also reminding everyone that we also have day-to-day responsibilities that we'll have to deal with as well. So just want to thank everyone that this conversation has started up again, because I've been eager to hear it discussed.
Thank you. And for a second time, Member Dennett.
And I apologize. I just forgot to say this when I spoke last. Through the chair, I think I would be very open to, and I believe Member Andrus spoke to it, the idea of doing festivals. And I like to connect dots and great programs that we have in our community as opportunities to do it. So again, I think there are some really unique and interesting opportunities that I would love to brainstorm on, whether that's utilizing an open streets program, potentially even on another street then, or identifying an opportunity to do that during a community street. It could be utilizing free HSR programming down to the impacted businesses during the highest levels of impact. And creating, whether it's spin-offs to, I'll speak to our program of Hamilton Day, but figuring out and doing different things. I think there's an opportunity to do this to help support those businesses. And what I like about doing the events and the programs is it helps and supports people coming to visit areas of the city they may not traditionally visit, but it really does showcase and highlight the other great functions that our city and our community have. So I would be very open to exploring those opportunities with anybody who wants to, because I think we could do some fascinating things that differentiate us as a community and set best practices going forward.
Thank you. And that exhausts, sorry? Sorry. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. If it's procedurally appropriate, I just want to make sure I understand. It's not on the motion, but I do think it's been raised a number of times that it warrants some discussion, or at least clarity on my part about where these conversations are having. To Member Dennett's point, I think you wouldn't get a whiff of opposition around this horseshoe on the need to explore those kind of opportunities with festivals and open streets and everything. Just so I'm clear, where are those conversations happening now, if any place? I'm just trying to find a home for it. And if this is the home, certainly, but just so I'm clear to Member Dennett, or whomever.
Okay. So you mentioned Member Dennett first, and see Member Andrus and Councillor Huang also interested in responding to your question, Councillor Wilson. So let's start with Member Dennett.
Well, through the chair, most of these conversations are happening inside my head, which isn't very supportive of the whole group. I would be very glad to. And again, we've got fantastic relationships with the team at ECDev and tourism and the other chambers. Like I would be glad to host a brainstorming session at the BIA. Sorry, make sure I mention all of our key partners. I would be glad to host a a brainstorming session about possible opportunities, because I just think it's really important. And I think, we also, the downtown wards are going to be significantly impacted, and we have additional impacts that are going to make it an even more important process. So if this council or committee is interested in us hosting something, I would be glad to have everybody over at the chamber office for some sandwiches and thinking outside of the ping pong balls in my brain.
Thank you, Member Dunnett. Still recognizing Councillor Wilson's point, however, which is to be able to formalize this discussion and some potential for consistency in reporting back and making sure that those dots get connected. Member Andrus, then Councillor Huang.
So I wanted to through the chair, speak to that, because I think you've raised an important point, Councillor Wilson. The HCBN has been chatting informally with Metrolinx around art animation and space and placemaking along the corridor, especially during the early works with some of the boarded up buildings. So having a table where these kinds of conversations are not existing in a silo, if the chamber's having separate ones around business support, I think is an excellent idea. So I would love a more formal process to come out of the, even if it's just a city working group or somewhere with city staff and Metrolinx in the chamber. I've also would love to attend that brainstorming session. Yeah, so I just wanted to speak to that I think that is an important point that you've raised. Thank you.
Awesome. So order a sandwich for Member Andrus. Next up is Councillor Huang.
I wanted to bring to committee's attention, in wearing my former economic development hat, we used to have a group called the Marketing Communications Committee, to which Brenda had actually referenced. That was in economic development. It was part of the Invest in Hamilton partnership. It was a sub-table where they were doing marketing communications across all of the anchor institutions, the BIAs, the chambers, anybody that would touch an investment opportunity. That used to be headed up by Mike Marini, but I think that now that Mike Marini has left the organization, perhaps we can ask Judy Lamb on the screen, where is that Marcom committee, and is that going to be struck up again? Because as we all heard from Brenda, that was something that was very influential at the time.
Yep, please go ahead, Judy.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Wang. Yes, we are still working with the Marcom committee, getting updates through our RAM team, while we can't procure at this point until everything's back up in terms of the cybersecurity with HR. That in the meantime, though, we are proceeding with the Marcom committee.
And just for clarity, RAM is the research and marketing team. So they're also a small team that Judy, Manager Lamb and Manager Patterson both oversee in economic development. So
thank you. Okay, back to you, Councillor Wilson. You got some responses to your question? Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think this is going to require some offline deliberation. It's always been a little bit of query on my part. We sit on an Open for Business subcommittee. We sit on this subcommittee. And while I absolutely respect and see the value of marketing, the question is marketing what, right? And those are sort of those public space opportunities, the absolute necessity of us to avoid unintentionally crossing each other's efforts out and not being uninformed. And it's just my personal philosophy that on this, we should be there absolutely to assist small business and people like the chamber who have those memberships and those things on the ground, and ensuring that we exert the maximum amount of community benefit. And in this case, the benefit being using space, using infrastructure, using planning, using staff, using marketing to support, in this case, small business, independent business owners. So I think we've flagged perhaps a gap here, but I'd like to see it as an opportunity here. So I think what I would respectfully like to do is, again, thanking very much Councillor Wang for her awesome motion, because it's much discussed, but taking this off-screen, off-site, to have those kind of intentional conversations with Member Wilson, Member Dunnett, Member Andrus, and staff to see what we might do here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So future motion perhaps for committee's consideration. So that exhausts, no? Yes? Okay, that exhausts our speakers list on the motion. It's been duly moved and seconded, and it's before committee to vote. And that carries. Next up is 12.2, applying a climate justice lens to LRT recommendations. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Nan. This came about many moons ago, it seems now, and I will be withdrawing it because I greatly appreciate the initiative taken by Director Shake and Director Lukasik, and the work and the thoughtfulness and the as we apply that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Formally withdrawn. Okay, onwards. Next item on the agenda is, oh, before that, no notices of motion formally. So we're on to adjournment. May I please have a mover and seconder? Mover, Councillor Kretsch, seconder, and Councillor Huang. And please vote if you want to adjourn. And as that vote is being tallied and carried, there we go. Thank you all for your support to the meeting. Thank you to non-voting members for your attendance. Thank you.